Hi, I'm Tracy Blevins with the Master Gardener Association of the Central Rappahannock area, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a few of my favorite garden tools that I keep in my bag, in my gardening bag, and also how to care and maintain for those tools. The first thing I'm going to talk about is selecting your tools. So the ones I'm going to show you today happen to be my favorites because they're based on my garden and my gardening needs. So what become your favorites really do depend on what your gardening needs and what you're working with in your garden. When you go to select your tools, a couple of tips that I have for you are do make sure you pick up and handle the tools and see how comfortable they are for you. Think about the weight of the tools if you're trying to decide between different ones. I tend to go with the lighter tools because that will not fatigue your hands as much, and make sure they fit your hands well and they're comfortable for you to use. Also, the color of the tools. A lot of people like wood handle tools because they just like that feel better. But bright colored handles like red, orange, yellow, they stand out if you happen to lay your tools down while you're working and you need to go back and find them. So that's something to remember. And also, quality tools do tend to last longer. And they also tend to have parts that are replaceable on them as well. So that's something to keep in mind. If you get the higher quality tools, they usually are easier to maintain. You can replace the parts rather than having to replace the whole tool again and again. So I'm going to just jump into my favorite tools. And the one I'm going to start with may be kind of an unusual one to start with. I'm going to start with a couple of general purpose tools. And for me, a hand cultivator has become a very general purpose tool for me. And I use this all the time in my garden for different things. I use it for digging holes, breaking up soil, weeding, edging, and things like that. When I say a cultivator, you might think about the long handle cultivator that's often used to break up soil in a garden bed. This is the short handle one, and it is that purpose, is to break up soil. So when I dump bags out into my wheelbarrow, I can use this to break up mulch, compost, garden soil I've bought, but also those perennial quart size holes for digging, for planting. I like to use this tool to dig instead of needing a shovel. The smaller transplanter or garden trowel, those are great for annuals and containers and beds that you're planting in over and over, and for smaller things. But I like this for planting those quart-sized perennials. I also like the width of this for edging my beds. And I also like, I find it's easy to weed with this tool too. So I can really dig into a clump of weeds and pull them out very easily. So this has become kind of an all-purpose tool for me, and that is a hand cultivator. Another all-purpose tool that people really love, and I do have, and has lots of uses. Some people just carry this around with them on their hip in a holster, and it's all they use. And it's known as a hori-hori knife. It's a Japanese digging knife, and you'll see lots of versions of this. They're called soil knives or weeding knives also. Many of them will have measurements on them so that you know how deep you're digging. Hori means dig, so that's why this is known as a digging knife or a soil knife. But it does have a sharp edge and a serrated edge. So people will also use this for cutting back a lot of things, for cutting back grasses and perennials. And they'll also use this for dividing plants. It's the serrated part is great for dividing roots and cutting through roots. And people have a lot of purposes and uses for this tool. So this is another general purpose tool to look into for you, is a Japanese digging knife, a hori-hori knife. I'm going to go into other categories that I always keep in my bag. Pruners, I always keep handy. There are basically two kinds. There are bypass pruners and anvil pruners, and I'm going to tell you the different purposes. The bypass pruners are this style, and that's because the blade is going to bypass that bottom part. Okay? And this style of pruner, the bypass pruners, are really what you want to use to make your sharper, cleaner, healthier, precise cuts on your ornamentals, on your valued shrubs and your trees, okay? That is their purpose, is for those pruning, healthy, precise cuts. The anvil pruners are also good for other things such as cleanup and debris and cutting back of non-ornamentals. So when you don't want to use your good bypass pruners, you can use the anvil pruners, which have these teeth here, and then the blade kind of goes down between those teeth. So this kind of makes a crushing motion, which is why you don't want to use it for those precision cuts on your ornamentals. It's, again, more for dead wood and for cleanup purposes. Another pruning tool that I really love and keep in my bag all the time is a pruning saw. And these come in small sizes and big sizes. And there are folding ones that are very easy to keep in your bag. So a lot of times when people are pruning with the hand pruners and then they get to something that's 1.5 inches in size in terms of a branch or a twig or something, they'll go to get loppers, those long handled loppers. And those are really not for precision cuts. Think of those long-handled loppers more like the Anvil Pruners. They're more for cleanup, dead wood purposes, and things like that. When you need to make a cut on a bigger branch that your bypass pruners can't do, go up to the folding pruning saws. These are really a good tool to learn how to use to make those cleaner, precise cuts on those slightly larger branches on your trees and shrubs, okay? And these come in a lot of different sizes, and there are folding ones that fit in your bag, and then there are really big pruning saws too. The next type of cleanup or pruning type of tool that I love is hand shears. I love to keep hand shears in my bag. There are the larger two-handled hand shears, but I like to keep this kind in my bag, and I use it for a lot of different things. I use it for cleaning up my tomatoes and my pepper plants. I use it for cutting back irises after they've bloomed and daylilies, because these can cut those hollow stems really well. Its main purpose has always been to cut back ornamental grasses, but you can use it to cut back perennials as well. So, and I do it for some deadheading of some things. I just find it easier to get in there and deadhead with these. So these are the handheld hand shears. Sometimes you'll see them called grass shears if you're looking for them. Weeding tools, again, this is kind of specific based on your needs and what type of weeds you're needing to remove and what's comfortable for you. There's a lot of different weeding tools. One that I use most often is known as an artichoke weeder. And you can just, it's nice and deep here, and you can just jab this down, and this is great for deep roots, taproot type of weeds like dandelions, wild onions, and things like that. So I like the artichoke weeder for that purposes. The other weeders, and there's a lot of different styles, depends on your preference and your weeds. Some people really like both of these tools. This one is sort of like an extension of your finger, and this one is great at pulling out those grassy weeds and getting in tight crevices and spaces. And a lot of people like there's a lot of Asian style of weeding tools, and what's comfortable in your hand and easy for you to learn how to use. And the type of weeds you have. Another style, I kind of call this like a stirrup hoe style, where you're just pulling out a lot of shallow weeds at one time, or little seedling weeds that are coming up. So this will take out a lot of those shallow or just beginning to come up weeds in a large area kind of quickly. Those are the weeding tools. I'm going to talk now about how to maintain and care for your tools. One of the things that I can share with you about this is prevention of wear and tear and rust on your tools is the main thing. I did a longer tool care workshop last spring, and I have reference links to other resources in that workshop video, and I'll put a link to that workshop video in this description for this video. So you can go look at a longer video with a lot more details on care and cleaning of your tools. The main thing, again, is preventing the wear and tear on your tools. So keeping them out of the elements, keeping them dry, putting them away dry, will really go a long way to preventing the wear and tear on your tools. One of the main problems is rust. So I'm going to start by talking about how to prevent rust on your tools, first of all. And again, it goes back to keeping them dry and clean. Over time, you're using your tools, and then that causes the just normal wear and tear on them. Cutting, using them in dirt and grit and soil and things like that, it causes abrasions on your blades and your metal. And then when there's abrasions and corrosion there, and then there's moisture, that's how the rust starts, and the rust will build up and up and up. So making sure you kind of clean them off and put them away dry, and keeping them out of elements is the best thing you can do to prevent rust. If you have a lot of rust on your tools and you want to try to save them, a couple of options. Again, the higher quality tools tend to have replacement parts. So you can just go online and see if you can just replace the blade instead of the whole tool. The other thing is, if you're want to keep it and it has a lot of rust, you can use steel wool. I don't recommend you do it as a regular maintenance though, because just the steel wool in itself is going to cause abrasions on your blades, okay? And then that's going to become like a repeating cycle. But if you have one that you're trying to reclaim and you want to take that rust off, you can use a little bit of steel wool to get it off. You don't have to go crazy about it. I don't recommend soaking these in vinegar either, because vinegar is acidic and vinegar can be corrosive to your tools and cause some pitting and things like that. So if you're trying to get a lot of rust off a tool to begin with, what I do recommend is you go to a general hardware store and you would look for a penetrating oil or lubricant oils. Read the cans and find the ones that say removes rust or prevents rust. That's the ones you want to choose. There's a lot of different things out there. And then I'm just going to point this down a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. You're going to spray it on your blades. Now, some people will take their tools apart. I don't do that. I haven't had the need to do that. You can take your tools apart. I recommend you take pictures as you take it apart, so then you know how to put it back together. But I usually just keep mine together and I will spray it really well with that penetrating oil on both sides. And then I'll use a soft brush. You don't have to get crazy with metal brushes. You can just use a toothbrush. I think works really well into the smaller parts. And you can also use just a scrub brush. So you're going to clean that off and then wipe it down. And you might have to repeat that a few times to get the rust buildup off. So we're going to move on to the other main steps of regular care, which is cleaning, disinfecting, sharpening, and then the last preventive step, which is to coat them again with a preventive oil. So the cleaning part, what I'm talking about is just your average household cleaner. So you don't have to get into anything really astringent or strong. Just like what you would use to wash your car with or wash your dishes with, you're just trying to clean off the dirt and debris. So the cleaning step is just to remove the dirt and debris. And you can do that in a soapy bucket. You can do it with a hose in your driveway. You can take your hand tools into your sink and wash them off in there. So that's how you're just going to clean them. Nothing that involved with that. When you go into these other steps, you also want to make sure your work area is well ventilated. You want to make sure, like when you're removing that rust, you may want to wear goggles. You may want to wear disposable gloves. Make sure you're using rags and cleaning clothes, things like that. So the disinfecting part, and I do these in steps because you don't want to mix things together. You don't want to mix your cleaning products with your disinfectant products. Use them separately. One recommendation has been for years is a 10% bleach soak for your garden tools. And the reason the disinfecting part is important is because you can move your pathogens in your garden from plants to plants. So if you've cleaned up something that has viruses or plant rust or other pathogens, bacteria, things like that, you can move that from plant to plant on your tools. So that's why it's occasionally important to disinfect your tools. I don't do the bleach thing often. It's sort of like the steel wool. It's kind of an extreme thing. It can be corrosive to your tools. You do have to soak them in that 10% bleach. My other workshop has a lot more details about that and resources on that if you feel it's necessary to do that. You might feel you can just skip the disinfecting part altogether because you haven't really done things like that in your garden. But the alternative is to use alcohol. So I find canisters of alcohol wipes, and that's what I like to use. You can also just get a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, and it needs to be at least 70% or stronger. And you can put that in a spray bottle and spray it on your tools. The thing about using the alcohol is it doesn't have to soak. So it works a lot faster, and it is a disinfectant for those garden pathogens as well as the bleach soak. And so that's the disinfecting part of your tools. And The reason it's necessary to do that again is so you don't want to move pathogens around. And the next part is sharpening your tools. And one of the most important reasons for doing that is because it helps improve the safety of the tools for you. So just like when you're working in a kitchen with dull knives, you know that's not safe. So dull garden tools can also not be safe for you. And also they're not great for your plants either, because they can tend to crush your plants, tear, rip, and cause harm to your plants. So to keep them clean, disinfected, and sharp is good for both yourself and your plants. The sharpening step, and again, I go into a lot more examples in detail in the other video about this. I'm just going to use two tools that I find most often available in garden centers, okay? One is just called a sharpening tool, and the other one is called a sharpening knife. I'm going to show you with the sharpening tool first. And if you get a close look, there's a flat side, and then there's the actual blade here that is the sharpening part, okay? And the reason I start with this is to kind of explain what you're sharpening on your blades here. There will be a curved side, and there will be a flat side to all your blades, curved and flat, okay? Just like there was a flat and the tool, sharpening tool part here. And what you're going to do, some people take their tools apart. I don't find it necessary to do that. But with this tool, this protects your knuckles here, and you put the flat side to the flat side, and you just come down. And then that pulls that sharpening part against the curved side. And you just do that 4 or 5 times, and you just see how this gets brighter and sharper here on the edge. So that kind of gives you a good understanding of how the angle is going to be to sharpen your blades. Okay, the other tool is a sharpening knife, and it has the little carbide bit here, which is what you're going to sharpen with, and you hold it towards you, and again, you're going to just go down a few times on that curved side at an angle. It depends on the angle, depends on your tool, and you'll get a feel for it, and you're just coming down that blade and sharpening it like that. Okay, and the same would work for the longer blades. There's a flat side and then a curved side, and you're really just sharpening this curved side. So you can hold it towards yourself and just get a good feel of the angle and come down that blade. And you'll see it start to sharpen and brighten up the edge of that blade. Okay? The very last part is protecting them for more abrasions and rust. And again, you would go back to the penetrating oil or the lubricants, and you spray them all over your tool here, and you let them soak in here, and you work the oil in good through all the working parts, both sides, and then you wipe it off. Now that helps protect them also from future wear and tear and rust. And that would be the last step. I hope you've enjoyed learning about some of my favorite garden tools today and how to care and maintain for them. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. And I hope you have a beautiful growing season. Thank you.